All right, guys, we are here with one of my favorite authors of all time. Guys, we have Kelly Martin with us. She lives in a 100-year-old haunted farmhouse in Middle Tennessee with her husband, three kids, and three cats. She'll never say a bad thing about the ghosts in her house because that would be rude. She's written over 40 books, both traditionally and independently. She loves abandoned houses, spooky books, and watches way too much YouTube. Now that she has started drinking coffee again, Kelly plans to take over the world, or at least stay up later at night. Same difference, right? Kelly, welcome. Guys, y'all can see this look on my face right now. I've been waiting. So you want to write a scary story by Kelly Martin? Because I have read tons of her middle grades of YA, and I absolutely love this lady and her writing. So I got to get away. I got my notes ready. Kelly, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it for you asking me to be here and to be here to talk to y'all about how to write scary stories or what I think about writing scary stories. This is on a weird tangent. I had really long hair. I've not been on camera in over a month for reasons, but I had really long hair the last time I was on camera. So now that I got it all cut off, if I keep looking over here, it looks strange to me to see all my hair go. So look over here. I'm sorry. Anyway, we are actually going to get started on how to write horror. So you want to write a scary story. So you have scary story ideas. Anytime you have a question, put it in the comments. If I don't see it, Jen will see it. She'll tell me all about it, and we'll try to answer your questions. So yeah, get you a pencil and paper and something to drink. I have some water here and a Sprite, but I think I've already drank all the Sprite. And we will get started. Okay, so you want to write a scary story. My name is Kelly Martin. I'm a traditionally and independently published author of over 40 books. This says 30. This particular slide is a little older, but it's closer to 40. It's kind of difficult to decide how many or figure out how many books I've actually written because some aren't in print anymore. Some have been taken down. Some have been in print from a publisher, but then I put them up indie after I got the rights back. So we're going to go with close to 40. I need to sit down sometime and figure it out. I've been writing since 2011. I do know that much. In August of 2011, my husband got me a laptop, which I was super excited about because he wanted to game on the main computer. But when I started writing in 2011, my kids were 5, 4, and 1 year old. So I would sit in the living room while they had, Backyardigans and Dora and everything on in the background. And I would write my books. I didn't originally start writing scary books. My first book was a young adult Christian book called Crossing the Deep. My second book was a series, Saint Sloan, Saving Sloan, and oh my gosh, The Fall, which doesn't go with, when I put it back out, it was not Surviving Sloan. It was something Sloan like that. But when it came out originally, it was The Fall. And then I had another young adult book called Big is Beautiful, which was a contemporary. Then I wrote mysteries, mostly all in young adult. And then I wrote a Regency-ish book called Betraying Ever After. And then it was Betraying Ever After, The Beast of Ravenston, which has the scariest scene I think I've ever written in it. And it's not even a horror book. So you can write scary scenes in your books and it not even be scary. And I don't know why this scene makes me so nervous. Not nervous, why it makes me, like, it always gives me goosebumps. Even when I was editing it, I think it's because I wasn't expecting it. And it was just like a throwaway line, which is one of my favorite things in horror. And one of my favorite things in like scary books or any kind of books, really. Because this one wasn't a scary book. This girl, it was in Regency Times. This girl, it was a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. this girl was in a big castle manor with this guy who was not very nice. And she was cleaning upstairs. She had a fever, so she was hallucinating because she had had this fever for a while. She's cleaning the floor. She asked her hallucination what was behind the locked doors, and the hallucination said that's where he keeps the bodies. And I don't know why, but every time I was editing that book and I got to that line, it freaked me out. So when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to write after that series, when I first started writing, the suggestion, the guidelines, the whatever people, when you sat down to, the advice, that's what I'm trying to say. The advice was to write in different genres, because then you would see different people, you get different readers. Now they say not to do that, but at the time, that was the advice. So I wrote a young adult Christian. I wrote like 4 young adult Christian, 5 young adult Christian books. Contemporary, I wrote Regency, historical, and then I'd written a paranormal, historical, contemporary book. That was one book, historical, contemporary, paranormal, in one book. So I was sitting around thinking what I wanted to write after that. And I got to thinking about all my books. Every one of my books, even my non-scary books, they all had at least one scary scene in it. My very first book, Crossing the Deep, there is a scene in there inspired by Stephen King's It. And it's, not really a horror book, but every book that I'd ever written had at least one scary scene in it. So I was like, you know what? Maybe this is trying to tell me something. So that's when I started writing horror and scary stories. Well, my first scary book was called Afterlife of Lizzie Monroe. That came out before I decided to stick with horror or paranormal. Then I wrote Heartless, Soulless, Breathless, Reckless, and Heart. That was one series. It was an angel demon series. And then I wrote a ghost hunting series, which is now my favorite thing to write, is ghosts and haunted houses and things like that. And that's dark and deadly things, dark and desperate things, dark and devious things, dark and dangerous things. And there's another one. It starts with a D, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. But sorry, that's my ghost hunting series that I absolutely love. And then I have standalones. Trinity Row is another young adult one. That one right there. And then I have gotten into middle grade horror, which is so much fun, guys. It is so much fun. And that is What Rachel Did and Fake Nora. Anyway, I didn't actually mean to get into all that, but I kind of did want to give a little background on how I got into writing scary stories, and that this doesn't have to be just for a scary story or just for a paranormal story or anything you want to write. You can put these elements into any story. If you have a contemporary story and your character's having a nightmare, you can put this in. That's what happened with Crossing the Deep. It was a very vivid nightmare. And it had a lot to do with the main character, who felt a lot of guilt that his best friend had died. And that, I don't know if I'm talking about that a whole lot in this speech presentation or talk to you guys. But one of the things I love about horror is the human of it. It's dealing with internal fears externally. I have a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of anxiety. This week has not been a great week for me in the anxiety department. So a lot of my characters have anxiety. A lot of my characters deal with their anxiety by dealing with external factors, especially in like Trinity Row. She's very, like, something happened, that somebody died again, and she feels tremendous guilt for it. She can't get over it. So it's her having to fight this house and the ghosts in the house to try to help herself internally. And sometimes that doesn't always have to be clear cut in your writing. You don't have to say, oh, this ghost represents anxiety. This ghost represents anger. If you watch The Haunting of Hill House, each episode is a stage of grief. There's 5 kids. Each kid goes through, the stage of grief. So, and it didn't have to knock you over the head. Like, I didn't know that when I watched it. I watched a commentary on it, and that's what showed. So, it doesn't have to knock your reader over the head that this ghost represents anxiety, and she is dealing with this to get over or to try to deal with an internal issue. You don't have to do that. But if you read between the lines enough, then you can do it. Okay, we're going to keep going. I've been talking about this for 10 minutes. I'm sorry. I'm also an abandoned house enthusiast. I love going to abandoned houses. It makes me happy. My favorite place, I went to Waverly Hills, which is an abandoned TB hospital in Louisiana, Louisville, Kentucky. And then I went to Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in Tennessee, which I live in Tennessee. It was like 2 hours from my house. Loved it. We went about a little over a month ago. Loved it. And I want to be a ghost hunter, but I'm scared to be a ghost hunter. I don't, Jen said that I live in a haunted house. I do. My husband's like, do you think we should talk? No, I don't think we need to talk to the ghosts. We have a good relationship. We're fine. I don't even know what they're saying. Let's get into this. Okay, so why horror? Why would you want to write horror? Why would you want to write a scary story? Why would you want to write a scary scene in your book? So, all stories make readers feel. They can either feel love, they can feel suspense, like in thrillers or suspenseful things. They can make you feel happy. They can make you feel scared. Any type of book or a story, a movie, anything makes you feel. The best kinds make you feel, in my opinion. So, why do we want people to feel afraid? Or why do we want to feel afraid? I think when you think about why other people want to feel afraid, because why else would people want to buy your scary book or read your scary story if they're not looking to feel afraid? So why do we personally like to feel that? Fear is an intense feeling. It's kind of like love. It's intense. It makes your heart beat faster. It makes you get tense. It makes you, I don't know about you, but if I'm watching a movie and, you build up to the fear moment, and then the fear moment happens, and then there's a release afterwards, and you're like, oh, that helps a lot. And it's a memorable feeling. You remember places where you were afraid. You remember times that made you afraid. There's lots of real life examples, but I don't want to get into any of those because we want to stay strictly in happy fiction land and not in any kind of real life technically situation. But most people, especially my mama's age, maybe your mama's age or grandparents' age or whatever, will remember where they were when, say, JFK died, because that was fear. I can tell you exactly where I was on 9/11. That because it was fear, you remember. So if you take that real life situation into fiction, what can you do to make that fear, to make that feeling that people are craving when they are reading your scary story? When I'm reading a scary story or a ghost story, I'm not going into it not wanting some kind of moment, and your reader's not either. So if you're my age, or a lot of you, this will have been on the internet, but let's see if it gives you the same feeling it gives me. Okay, I'm about to show you a picture. Oh, I'm going to tell you that there will be a lot of pictures in this slideshow, but there's not going to be anything gory. I've took out all the gore. It's going to be we're talking about mostly scary movies, because they're easier to find pictures of. I can't really show you pictures of like books or whatever, but of course movies and TV shows were made by writers, so it all works out. But no gore, because I know there could be little kids, and a lot of you might not like to see. I don't like bloody horror. It's not my favorite, but I do love Final Destination. I don't know. Anyway, so there's not gonna be blood. There's not gonna be any bad language or anything like that. So I want to put that out there before we get started. We are talking about scary things, but nothing that's going to like terrify, and no gory stuff. Okay, so I'm going to show you this picture. Let's see if it terrifies you like me. You ready? Are you ready? Y'all. In the comments, can you tell me where that book came, or that picture, why that picture is terrifying? Because it's terrifying. It is literally terrifying. If you are behind that on the road, I don't know, there's like, I can't even look at that picture without getting an intense fear. This is actually, of course, from the movie Final Destination 2, which terrified a whole generation of people who cannot get behind those kind of cars or behind those trucks, because we're all afraid that this will happen to us. And I think it is a valid concern because it can happen. And we don't want it to happen to us. That is memorable. It is a memorable scene. It gave us a feeling. When we see that picture, you're like, you can still like feel the tightness in your chest. That is what we want in our stories. All right, let's see if I can get, okay. Did you flinch? Because I flinched every single time. I'm behind one of those trucks, and we have a log truck company not too far from my house. I don't own it, but my county does, and it terrifies me every time. Okay, so how do you get those intense feelings in your story? Here are some tips to get them in your story. Be sure to have rise and fall of emotions and intensity. If you think of your book as a roller coaster, and it's going up and up, and it's okay if your intensity rises like this. If you keep your scares or keep your intensity, like let's say this is baseline. If you keep your intensity like up here, your reader cannot handle that. Their brain will shut down, and it won't be as scary because they're used to, this is their new normal up here. We've all heard of new normal lately. So then you have to keep raising it or whatever. So what I like to do in my stories is have like, you're going up, you have a jump scare, you go down. And then you give a chance to breathe. And then you raise the tension up a little bit. And something happens. And then you let the reader breathe. And sometimes in these little bottom low moments, that's when you can throw in another scare when they're not expecting it. And those scares, when you're not expecting it, it's awesome. The amount of letters that I've got from people talking about those scares in those moments when they least expect it, make my day. Love it. I love it. So, rise and fall of emotions. Don't keep everything steady. That gets boring. It gets stagnant. And it can be, if you're watching a movie, this could just be me, but if I'm watching a movie and it's a very, like, I don't know, action, let's think of action, like an action movie. If the action just does not let up through the movie at all, I get desensitized to it. It's like if you've seen 40 people shot and then somebody gets shot, it's like, okay. And if that was like a main character, then the feeling, the intensity is not there. If being run over by a log truck was something we saw every day, that movie wouldn't have stayed with us like it was now. So have your rise and your fall of your emotions and your scares, and there's a reason most scary stories, and it's kind of funny though. If this was real life, if I was a ghost in real life and I was trying to get a family out of a house, I wouldn't start with easy stuff first. The little stuff. Like I wouldn't jiggle the handles, and I wouldn't like whisper in their ear, and I wouldn't just like pull blankets off. Like if I was a ghost and I wanted somebody out of my house, I would like do the big stuff first, right? And then I would go on about my afterlife. But in ghost stories, because it's on a story structure, you start here, little scares, move up, down, around, things like that. So you have to follow the story, or you need to follow the story structure. Now, it's not saying you can't have like a big scare to start with, but give your reader and your characters time to chill out before you move on. All right, next is make things logical in your world. Especially in horror books or ghost stories or whatever, it doesn't have to be logical. But you make the rules, kind of like in a fantasy world. You make the rules. Stick with those rules. If you're writing about vampires and your vampires can be killed by stakes through the heart, that is logical in your world. If in your world vampires are killed with Sharpies, then that is logical in your world, and that's fine. If in your world you have a vampire who gets killed with Sharpies and they get stabbed with a stake and they die, that's not logical in your world. So think about things like that when you make your world and how you make your feelings. If you set up at the beginning of the story that your vampires don't like Sharpies, and then you have a main character that keeps a Sharpie behind their ear, foreshadowing, and then it increases the feelings of anticipation or what's going to happen next in your story. Also, this is from the lovely Candyman, which I love. Next, you need layers to your story. Especially like in The Haunting of Hill House, every character has such different layers to them. Nobody is, and this is in any story, not just horror stories, nobody is good or evil totally. Even good characters can have evil thoughts or not great motives, and your bad character can have good intentions, right? So have layers to your characters. I did a seminar one time on how to write a good bad guy, and in that we talked about having your bad guy have layers. Nobody does anything without a motivation. Anything. Getting up and going to fix something to eat is motivation because you're hungry. Getting out of bed, motivation could be you got to go to the bathroom. That's motivation. Wanting to destroy the world is motivation. So nobody does something just because they're evil. They need a reason. Even if you were the most evil person in the entire world and you decided that you wanted to, I don't know, we'll say kill this person. Well, why? Why? You need that motivation. You need those layers to make characters interesting in all types of writing. Atmosphere is a huge thing in writing horror, especially. one of my favorite genres, and we will talk about genres in a few minutes. One of my favorite genres is Gothic horror. And if you think about The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, and even Wuthering Heights is not real. It is a ghost story. It has ghosts in it. Even that is, the atmosphere is amazing. I love those types of horror stories, and Wuthering Heights and The Woman in Black are some of my favorite ghost stories, or even some of my favorite stories, just because of the atmosphere and you can even do that in modern stories. We'll go back to The Haunting of Hill House, which is a modern story. It has a Gothic atmosphere. Your house has a lot of time, like in Trinity Row, the house is a character. In your scary stories, houses can be characters. Towns can be characters. In The Mist is technically a character. Your atmosphere can be technically a character in your story, which I think is really cool. Make your reader lean in. As in, have you ever watched a scary movie? Well, okay, not even a scary movie. We'll use this as an example. Long ago, when I first got on the internet, there was a video going around that said, the first ghost caught on video. And if you clicked on it, I don't know if any of you have seen this or not. If you click on it, there's this car, and it's driving through this windy road. And you have to stare at the car to see this ghost, right? And it makes you lean in because you can barely see the car, and the car's coming forward. So you lean in, and then all at once, this ghost comes out. It scares the daylights out of you, or it did me. I learned my lesson to never click on those things again because they're terrifying. That's what I mean. Make your reader lean in. Have a throwaway line that, like in The Beast of Ravenson, that would be leaning in. She's sick, and she's like, what's going on? And this is where they keep the bodies. That's a technically a throwaway line that is not really a throwaway line, but it catches your reader's attention, and it makes some kind of jump just a little bit, or get that feeling just a little bit. Anytime that you can have a reader be reading your book and be so into it that a bang on the door in their real house terrifies them, makes them jump, makes them throw your book, you've got them. It's perfect. And when people tell you that that's happened, it's amazing. I love it. I don't know what that says about me, but I love it. Okay, these are types of horror. We have found footage horror, which is in books. This can be diaries or news clippings. This back here, Dead House by Dawn. Is it Dead House? Yeah. Dead House by Dawn Kurtich. That is a found footage type book. And found footage movies, of course, are like the Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity. Slasher would be Jason and Michael Myers here. You can have slashers in just your normal scary books. I've never written a slasher book. I should write a slasher book. Psychological horror, which is, I have to say, psychological horror, ghost horror are my two favorites, I do believe. So psychological horror, which would be like Psycho, Norman Bates, we all go a little mad sometimes, and Get Out would be psychological horror as well. Then we have haunted house horror, which is so much fun to write. The house can be a character in your story. which makes it fun too. And then we have ghost hunters, and how this is the whole. I didn't think about this when I made this, but this is the whole plot to Dark and Deadly Things. There we go. Gothic horror is, if we had gothic horror and haunted houses and psychological horror all together, that'd be my favorite thing. That's my favorite thing to read. So yeah, gothic horror would be like, in the book world, we've already talked about that. Wuthering Heights is more gothic than horror, but The Woman in Black is definitely a gothic horror book. Yeah, I was fixing to say The Haunting of Hill House might be, but it's more of a, well, it was contemporary when it was written, I suppose, horror book. Supernatural horror. We have The Conjuring. I think that's The Conjuring up on top. Then, which is, I think it was a demon, but I could be wrong. I've never actually seen The Conjuring. I've watched Dead Meat Kill Count of The Conjuring, I think. I've watched something of The Conjuring, but I've not actually watched the movie. I have seen Interview with a Vampire, which was the absolute first novel I ever read in my life. I was in 8th grade. The movie had just came out. I was obsessed with Brad Pitt, y'all. Interview with a Vampire. I loved it. I love the book. I love the movie. I love it. Supernatural horror got me into vampires. Love vampires. I've never written a vampire, but they're my favorite supernatural creatures. Why have I not written vampires? I don't know, but I'm not. Then we have Catherine over here and Stefan, who's hungry. Then we have comedy horror, which is hilarious. If you've not, I don't know your taste, but Tucker and Dale versus Evil is hilarious. It's not, I mean, it's gory, not incredibly clean, but it's hilarious. My husband and I watched it one year for anniversary. It is funny. And then Shaun of the Dead is it's not a spoof of Dawn of the Dead, but it's a zombie apocalypse taking over the world. So that's a good one too. And then I won't keep it on this one long because I can't. Body horror is my least favorite. I can't handle it. I don't like it. This is The Fly, which this was one of the better pictures I could find from The Fly. And then werewolves are actually body horror too. Anything that changes a body shape is technically body horror. It doesn't have to be like The Fly. Anything like shifting or shaping or things like that is body horror. Other types of horror include sci-fi horror for like Aliens, teen slasher, Scream, zombie horror like The Walking Dead, holiday horror like Happy Death Day, serial killers like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Then you have movies like The Purge, which is definitely horror. I don't know what category it would go into, but it's definitely horror. Maybe slasher? Not really slasher. I'm not sure. Okay. We have key elements of horror that we need to think about. Number one is have characters that you care about. A lot of times in like back to Final Destination, the characters have never been the top priority. I don't believe in Final Destination. The first movie maybe, but not the rest of them. And that's easier in like teen horror movies, teen slasher movies, because if you have a group of teens, basically kids that you like, and then somebody kills them, nobody wants to see that. So in slashers especially, slashers don't really, generally, this is all generalizations, don't have characters that you care an overabundance about because they don't want you to feel sad when they die. If you're not writing a slasher, you want your reader to care about your characters. And that don't mean love every character. That means to care some way about a character. And care can mean a character that they hate, like absolutely loathe. But that is a feeling. And you want your readers to feel something. Because when they feel something, then you've got them. And that is the best feeling is when you can make somebody feel something for a character. So you're not trying to write a bunch of characters that people are going to love. You're trying to write characters that provide emotions for your reader, whether good emotions that you do not want to see them hurt or scared or whatever, or emotions that if a ghost pushed them down the stairs, you will be clapping and your reader will be clapping. That's an emotion too. So another key element of horror is fear of the unknown. Horror has a lot to do with fear, of course. So it has different levels of fear, and people are scared of different things. That's why, like I talked about before, I like the human in horror. I like the dealing with internal things through horror. That's just one of my favorite things. It needs to have emotions, happy emotions, sad emotions. Have some fun, have some laughs in there, but have emotions. And when you can make your reader feel those emotions, when they are terrified that your character is going to die and they don't want them to die, you have them. I always write my scary stories in first person because this may just be my thinking. If nobody else in the world may think like this, and that is totally fine. But in my mind, the person, like if I'm reading a story, it's like somebody is talking to me. They are telling me that story. If it's in, well, not first person, present tense is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's first person or third person. I'm talking about tense. Past tense and present tense. If a story is in past tense, to me, that means that the character has survived the story and is telling me about things that happened in the past. If a character survived the story and is telling me how things happened, well, then I know they survived. So if in chapter 30 or whatever, I have them in peril, well, I know they're going to live because it's in third person. So it doesn't get me all nervous thinking they're not going to live. That's like, to me, if you watch a movie and let's say if you're watching, I don't know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the very first shot was the girl in the back of the truck getting away from Leatherface, and you knew she survived. When she's in the story, you're not going to worry about her because you know she's going to live. But if a book is in present tense, that means that the narrator is telling you the story as it's happening. And that narrator can die. And you don't have that safety net as a reader for that and that peace of mind, knowing that that character is not going to die. Because they very well might. They are telling you this story. It could end. It could fade to black. You don't know that. So that's why I love writing in present tense, because it adds a layer, because we talked about layers before, it adds a layer of, oh my gosh, something could happen to this person. I don't want to give my readers any sense that, one, they know what's going to happen, or two, that anybody's safe. That could just be me. Also, another key element of horror is the storyline. Of course, you don't just want to say, I'm going to write a scary story. Jump scare, jump scare, jump scare, jump scare. Not going to work. You need a storyline to make all the jump scares. If your storyline is your main character goes to a haunted attraction, like an actual like Halloween haunted house, then it's jump scare, jump scare, jump scare. That's fine. That's the storyline. But it needs to have a storyline. And an ending. Endings are hard, as Chuck from Supernatural used to say. Endings are hard. Especially endings in horror, because you spend so much time building up, building up, building up, building up, building up. And then, now what? Now what's going to happen? Endings are hard. But that's what most people, except for the Final Destination, I don't have anything to do with the ending. That's what most people remember is your endings, which is kind of sad sometimes, but it's a key element. Okay, remember, everything needs motivation. No one, spirit, house, anything does anything for no reason. You have to have a reason. Your reason can be that you're bored. That is a reason to go do something. That is a reason your bad guy can go do something. That could be the reason that your house is doing something. I have a book out. Well, it's not out. It's finished. It's going to come out soon. And the main character, one of the main characters, she's a ghost. She possesses people to kill other people because she's bored. That is her motivation. Your motivation for your character can be that you're bored. The house's motivation can be that it's an evil house because it's bored. Anything like that. Just think of if you watch The Vampire Diaries, Damon, when he killed Vicky because he was bored. That's a motivation, and that started a whole storyline. So keep that in mind. Okay. I know I need to hurry up. Do you have to write like Stephen King to write horror? No. These are all other wonderful horror writers. Mary Downey Hahn, which is my absolute favorite. She writes middle grade scary stories. She's awesome. Jonathan Mayberry, he had the V Wars, and he's written Ink, which is a lot. I think he writes a little bit like Stephen King, only you know how Stephen King, when he writes, he has like 10 pages to tell you one thing at the end. Jonathan Mayberry writes like 2 pages to tell you the one thing at the very end. So, Dacre Herman, Hide and Seeker, which is a middle grade. Toni Morrison, which is who wrote Beloved, which is amazing. I love Beloved. C.J. Tudor wrote The Chalk Man, which is a lot like It. If you like the movie It, but you don't want to read the book It, read The Chalk Man. It's a lot like it, a lot shorter. I really like The Chalk Man better than It. K.R. Alexander writes loads of middle grade horror. Dawn Kurtich writes young adult horror. Dead House is one of hers. I love her books. April Baker has the Dead Files series. Sin Baylog has Alone. She has a lot of scary books too. Kendar Blake, Anna Dressed in Blood, which has to be one of my all-time favorite book titles. Things to remember, a story can't just have a rise in action without any sort of dip for your reader to gain composure. Too much intensity makes them desensitized. You can wait to reveal who the true villain is, especially in thrillers. Remember to add foreshadowing, even if it's a quote-unquote throwaway line. Throwaway lines are my favorite things to write, and their favorite things to read. And does their motivation make sense? Then we have internal bad guys. We won't get into that. Let's talk about these folks and what sort of emotions they give you. Think of this lady. What kind of emotion does she give you? If you've seen Misery and you're a writer, she makes you feel some things. This is Lilith from Supernatural. She makes me feel scared. Here's Stu and Billy from Scream. If you watch Scream, Billy is one of the killers because of his mother. Like, he has a family issue with the reason that he's a killer. Stu does it because he thinks it's fun. Different motivations, but they have a motivation. The Sanderson sisters, Hocus Pocus, is technically a horror movie. Twilight is in the horror section. Doesn't have to be all blood and guts. Anything supernatural, or it doesn't have to be supernatural. Anything that makes a fear emotion can be horror. He makes me feel unhappy. Well, I put him on there because he's Tim Curry. And, you know, this is Final Destination 5. If you've not seen Final Destination 5, you need to watch Final Destination 5. It's amazing. It is heartbreaking. This is how you write a scary series. And this is where we talk about endings. There we go. This one. He creeps me out, especially in this picture. This is Norman Bates from Psycho. Bless him. And you can, we didn't talk about it, but you can also have natural horror, which is like the birds. In the birds are the villains, the bad guys, I suppose. So you can have natural horror. And then there's Sam from Supernatural. Bless his heart. I love season 4 and season 5 and season 6. Okay. We're going to go to questions. I have like 1 minute. I'm so sorry it took this long. You can find me at kellymartinbooks.com. Thank you so much for Jen for asking me to participate. Thank you for being here. There's my little man.
All right. So, Kelly, we love you. Any questions that you guys might have, you can send them on to Kelly. Please connect with her on social media. We are now having to transition straight over to our next session that starts at 4:45, and we are going to be listening with Tracy Murdoch, how to be writing in a busy season. So, Kelly, thank you so much. I have tons of notes. Love you so much. I hope you guys have had a great teaching lesson today about horror. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you so much.